Let's talk about the wild, wild ride of NFTs. Just a couple of years ago, they were everywhere. They were supposed to be this huge digital revolution that would change everything about art, gaming, and how we own stuff online. But now, it's pretty quiet. So we're going to break down what fueled that insane hype, what went so wrong, and where this surprisingly powerful tech might actually be headed next. All right, so let's get right to it. Back in 2021, 2022, you couldn't escape NFTs. It seriously felt like they were the future of, well, everything. But now, in 2025, you barely hear about them. So the billion-dollar question is, what happened? Where did they all go? And this really captures the whiplash perfectly. On one side, you have this image of pure, chaotic energy, the digital world buzzing with excitement. And on the other side, that same world, but empty, quiet. This is the whole story in a nutshell, the unbelievable contrast between the hype and the reality. To really understand why everything went quiet, we've got to go back to when things were, well, loud, really loud. This was the first act, the absolute frenzy of the digital gold rush, a time when a simple picture could somehow be worth millions. Just let this number sink in for a second. $25 billion. That's what the NFT market was worth at its absolute peak. This wasn't some niche hobby, you know? It was a full-blown economic tidal wave with an unbelievable amount of cash chasing these digital things. So who was behind all this? This is the crucial part. It wasn't just a few crypto insiders. You had major artists getting in on it, superstar athletes, huge gaming companies like Ubisoft, even high-fashion brands. This mainstream rush gave it this powerful feeling of legitimacy, like, hey, if they're in, I can't afford to miss out. And this quote just perfectly sums up the mood of the time. The optimism was off the charts. People genuinely believed this wasn't just a fad. It was a fundamental revolution that was going to change everything. The expectations were just massive. But you know how these stories go. What goes up that fast usually comes down just as hard. And the NFT market was no exception. All of that crazy excitement just slammed on the brakes. So the big question is, why? What caused such a brutal and sudden collapse? I mean, the numbers here tell a pretty stark story. Just look at this chart. The bar for 2021 is a skyscraper, and then you look over at 2025, and it's barely a speed bump. This wasn't some minor dip. It was like falling off a cliff. Sales volume fell over 63% year over year at one point. It was a total freefall. And it wasn't just that people stopped trading. The actual value of the entire market just imploded. More than 80% of the market's total worth from its peak just vanished. Billions and billions of dollars in theoretical value gone. Poof. Now, a crash like this never happens for just one reason. It was really a perfect storm. First, you had just wild speculation, people buying stuff only because they hoped to sell it for more later. Then the market got flooded with tons of low-quality projects and, yeah, a lot of outright scams, which just shattered people's trust. But the real nail in the coffin, the fatal flaw, was that most of these NFTs, they didn't actually do anything. Okay, so whenever a market crashes this hard, you always get these fascinating stories of who survived and who didn't. Not everyone was affected in the same way. So let's look at a few specific cases that really show who made it through the storm and who got completely washed away. Let's start with the most famous ones of all, the Bored Apes. I mean, these guys were the kings, the icons of the whole movement. But here's the thing, even they weren't safe. This massive collection saw its sales just plummet, dropping over 60% in some parts of 2025. It was the ultimate proof that absolutely nobody was immune. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, there were a few outliers. In the middle of all that wreckage, you had projects like Pudgy Penguins that did the impossible. Their sales actually went up. So what was their secret? They focused like a laser on building a real, tight-knit community and delivering actual value. It was a huge lesson. When things go bad, community is your lifeline. And if you want the perfect textbook example of that lack of utility problem, look no further than the Australian Open. They launched thousands of NFTs tied to the tournament. But what happened the second the tournament was over? Their value dropped by up to 90%. They just sat there, useless. It just goes to show you that when value is tied to a single moment in time, it evaporates without a long-term purpose. So, all of that brings us to where we are today, in 2025. And it's a totally different world. The market now is a lot smaller, a lot calmer, and frankly, a lot more skeptical. The party's over, and what's left is a whole new landscape. Okay, just look at this comparison for a second. On one side, you have the peak market size, $25 billion. On the other, the total sales volume for a single month, November 2025, 320 million. The difference between the billions moving every month during the boom and where we are now, it's just brutal. And this table kind of breaks down that new reality perfectly. The total value of the market, a tiny fraction of what it once was. The number of people actively buying, that's fallen off a cliff. But, and this is the interesting part, the supply of projects for sale is still huge. You've got this classic economic problem, massive oversupply and almost no demand. But wait, the story doesn't just end with a spectacular crash. Not at all. Because even though the giant speculation bubble popped, the actual technology behind NFTs is still here. And now it's finally starting to find some real, practical, and honestly, much more interesting uses. And this right here captures the biggest change. The whole focus has shifted away from getting rich quick. Instead, the people who are still building in this space are focused on creating things with real long-term value. Basically, the technology is finally growing up. It's moving from being a casino to being a useful tool. So where is this new, more mature tool being used? Well, it looks like it's heading down three main paths. First, in video games, to create unique items that you can truly own. Second, for real-world assets. Think digital proof of ownership for a house or a piece of art. And finally, as things like VIP passes for events or customer loyalty programs. And that leaves us with one big question hanging in the air. Are we actually watching a revolutionary technology find its true purpose? Or is this just a quiet moment, a pause, before the next wave of hype and speculation comes along? I guess only time will tell.